This land was made for you and me. This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to New York Island.
William, good morning.
Good morning.
Hello.
Good morning,
We're here
Joann.
with our coffee, and my coffee is not spiked this morning. Otherwise, it could be a happy hour and a coffee hour. But anyway, it's just coffee. How
Good
are
morning,
you?
Joann.
Hello.
Well, folks, my name is William John Cox, as you may know. This is my friend, long-term friend, Joann. And
Hello.
we've been talking about politics and philosophy for about the last 3 or 4 months, and we just took a month off. So we're back, and we try to bring an independent perspective to the news. And we'd like for you to hang with us for a while, if you would, instead of going away. And if you do, please hit the subscribe button before you go. But in any case, stick around, folks, and let's see what we're going to talk about today.
All right. Well, a whole month, William. A whole
Yeah.
month has gone by. It's like, in election time, it's like 20 years has gone by. You know what I mean? Like, it's crazy. And we're deep into what feels like a real race now. Back in July, before Biden stepped out of the campaign, it was feeling like it was just going to be I don't know. It was going to be a one-man dart to the finish type of thing. And now it really feels like we're in a race. And I do feel like there is a distinct choice for the voters between the two candidates. I mean, there always was with Biden too, but now it really feels like we've got we've got two horses in the race, right? And so for me, when I think about the campaign right now, it just kind of feels like, wow, it's almost like whiplash. If you think about back to July and where the campaign was, especially after the assassination attempt, and where we are now, the temperature is just so different. And it's just interesting to think about why that is and what has propelled that.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think you can discount social media, because if you look at the memes on social media of Kamala Harris, it's just like this. She's dancing, she's this, she's that. She feels like a much more contemporary, modern candidate than either one of them were. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And I think generally attractive.
Mhm.
I mean, I saw some where they've tried to convert her into a hyena, with her laugh and her smile. But overall, I think
Not
it is the
working.
level of energy that she's bringing in that really has changed the dynamic at the moment.
And I do wonder, it's so interesting how things happen sometimes, because everyone's like, oh, he pulled out so late, and then this hasn't gone according to the schedule it should have. But I almost feel like that's also what's contributed to the energy, because it was like this focus of if Biden had stepped out a year ago and she had a whole year, it would have been a totally different dynamic too. And I don't know if it would have been as energized and as positive of one. So I feel like the whole way that things have come down has worked to the Democrats' favor.
Well, if she had had a year, she might have had more time to develop some of her own more progressive stances. At this point, coming in right at the end, I think from what I'm hearing is that she's trying to adhere to the record. So she's binding herself closer to the last 4 years. Or if she had been running independently for the last year, she might have had some more independent positions.
That's true. That's true. And yet at the same time, she seems to be seizing the mantle of the change candidate, which is really interesting, given that she's part of the administration.
Well, part of what I saw about the interview was that she's still trying to talk around the issues. She's still being a politician. She's afraid to take positions.
Yeah.
And it's called a word salad.
Yeah.
And she's certainly capable of that. And I think that they have to get over that. Both she and Walz. He's trying to defend his military record, his comments about the IVF of their children. These were just minor misspeaks. But certainly when you lay them up beside the massive deception that is taking place on the other side, I think that that will shine through. Except that we've become so used to these totally negative campaigns, and so I'm hoping that the Democratic Party will really begin to really run on the issues and come up with policy positions. And then they can say, we have a policy position. What's your policy position? Instead of,
Exactly.
and that's the way to respond to the attacks. And, but, it's certainly wide open, is it not?
It is totally wide open because you can sense that. I think from the campaign perspective, they're like, okay, we want to ride on this joyful, fun, social media, kind of like, substantiveless social media, thing as long as possible. And I get that from I've worked on campaign. I get that. I get why they want to do that. I mean, it's not a bad strategy, but that will run out. Okay. You can't do that for, so people are going to want to understand, what is she going to do about healthcare? For instance, like she had a certain perspective back in 2019. What is her perspective? What are we going to do to protect reproductive freedom in the, what are the things that we can do in this environment that a president can do? I think she's going to need to do that. And I think what I'm looking at right now, especially because of what I work in every day, I work in the media space. So I'm really looking at how is the media helping or hurting here? And I don't mean social media. I'm talking about traditional media. And I think, from the interview, I feel like they're struggling for what their place is in this. They're trying, and I feel like their place is to do exactly what you're talking about, to circle the politicians back to the issues, and to be like, what are you going to do on this? And when you hear about that interview that they gave, it's very clear that was a missed opportunity in terms of issues.
Exactly.
That's what, and that's where the media needs to be stepping in, because CNN decided that they were going to go to talk about race and stuff, and and I like the fact that she just shut it down. I really, really, really respect that she said, next question. She said,
Right.
I really respect that, because they were playing into talking about Donald Trump is, the more outrageous things Donald Trump does. And this is what, I guess the last thing I just want to, I feel like Donald Trump turned and this goes back to the 2016 and, the 15 primary in 2016, he turned the traditional media into some sort of cheap social media, because the way that they covered him back then, they were covering every tweet he did. They were covering this and that. They lost their moorings of what they could bring to the conversation versus just following what he's putting on Twitter. And I don't think they've ever gotten their moorings back. That's
Right.
how yeah.
Right. Well, I saw that he's using his Truth Social for his outrageous stuff, thinking that the rest of us aren't watching that and following that, but his base is. And so he's retweeting and recirculating some really crazy
It's a strategy.
stuff.
That's
But
a strategy.
it's still going to come back to haunt him, I think, with the reality of it, because it's still out there. And
and the media is following that and putting that in front of people's faces.
And of course, this is also going along with J.D. Vance, also his really outrageous statements in the past, particularly his misogynistic statements about women. I mean, I don't fully
understand their strategy, because they need to win women.
I think these are reaching back in the past, though, when he was just really trying to be outrageous a bit and
get attention. Yeah.
Right. But then now he's coming back saying, well, there will not be a national anti-abortion bill, and things like that.
Who could ever believe anything that they say about abortion at this point? I mean, it's absurd. I mean, Trump has flip-flopped, but that's what I find so fascinating, is saying that she's flip-flopped on things. Anyway, but I mean, the thing that I think is really going to play badly with women, definitely abortion is already, I mean, they're already going to be struggling a lot with women because of reproductive freedom issues. But, um, you know, speaking about social media and speaking about what he's doing on Truth Social, he's been starting to post some lewd things
Yeah,
about
about the candidates.
Yeah, about Kamala Harris too. And so that is real. I mean, there's one thing about, saying things outrageous to play to the base or whatever, but that is an area where I really think women voters are going to be totally turned off. And he needs suburban white women.
Right. I saw an article this morning. I forget his name. His first campaign manager from 2016's back on board. Carrie.
Manafort?
No.
No,
Oh,
not Manafort.
long name starts with an L.
Okay.
Anyway, he was his first campaign manager, and he was fired because he was accused by a major Republican donor, a woman donor, that he groped her and actually physically assaulted her, and she demanded that that Trump do something about it, and so he personally called her and apologized. His son, Donald Jr., called and personally apologized to her. And now she was quoted in this article as being outraged that they're bringing him back aboard. And that was not the sole incident involving this individual. There were other incidents that have come up. So this tells us that he is at this point reaching really hard, trying to recreate something that worked for him in the past. And as I think about it now, really, I think it's going to come down to a balancing of, because you now have two administrations. You had his administration and you have the Biden administration.
You have records.
So
you have records to
you
look
can
to.
compare those two things. And I think that even though I saw a stat that said 80% of the people feel that they are worse off today than they were 4 years ago, that's a pretty high number. But I think that is true, that people are feeling the pinch in a lot of ways. I mean, I went to the grocery store yesterday and picked up a couple of things, and it was $99. And
you can't deny it.
And I looked
you
at
cannot deny it.
I mean, it wasn't even 2 bags of groceries. It was just
it's ridiculous. I mean, you cannot deny it. And I think initially there were some economists on the kind of liberal side that were trying to say that we weren't seeing what we were saying. And I think it just irritated people. They just have to embrace that it's true.
Really,
I mean, we are all feeling it. Yeah.
So there's that. But I do think that people can look back and make some assessment between the two administrations as to what they did that they promised to do. And in the First Amendment of Trump, he always promised he was going to have this gold-plated health care. He's going to get rid of Obamacare and so forth, and
replace it with something great.
But something great, and he's sort of trying to wave his hands and saying that again, but it's not quite working. When across the country, I would be willing to bet that a large percentage of his supporters are on Obamacare.
Isn't that the irony? Isn't that the irony?
And they are, so I think that there will be this. I continue to believe in us. I continue to believe.
Thank you, William.
I continue to believe in the ordinary working people of this country, the salt of the earth. And a lot of them are supporting Trump because they felt, for a lot of reasons, that they've been left out of the whole picture. But I think that they are also smart enough to realize that they may not want to go down that road. That the victories that he claims were really victories for the wealthy. The tax cuts and other things didn't really help the ordinary working people in this country all that much.
So I absolutely agree with you.
And plus the inflation, a lot of it can be perhaps tracked back to what he did with China and imposing the tariffs.
Well, there's some of that, but
some of that. I mean, but there's a part of that in terms of the higher prices we're paying
Well,
can be
there's a part
tracked
of
back to
that
that.
from all the COVID spending. I mean, and to be fair, I mean, we all have to admit that a lot of us got some kind of benefit from that COVID spending, whether it was an SBA loan out of the, to help somebody, or it was like the expansion of the EDD assistance during the pandemic. And like, I think we all have to accept that all of us had a part in that bloated overspending that happened during COVID. I mean, like, I completely think it was way over the top. But we also had unprecedented thing. And also both administrations participated in that overspending. I mean, he's the one who sent out all the stuff on the checks at the beginning that everybody got, remember? And then Biden carried it forward. So there was a massive glut of overspending that happened during the pandemic. And we are now, the inflation is very much, you can't put that much money out into the economy like that and not have it, the government multiplier effect, right? So
Good point.
So bottom line, macroeconomics. I mean, but, so that's what and I do feel like it will reduce over time. The problem is that prices are sticky and people don't like bringing prices down. So, I mean, we all have to contend with that, and we all have to acknowledge that we're part of that, I think. But I think that what we're going to see is, like, again, to shift back to the role of the media, when we were talking about, when you're talking about the two administrations, this is where the media, the traditional media, the reporters, the journalists, this is where they have a role that isn't, they don't have to go to social media looking for, chasing, clicks. They have a role to set up things and actually analyze and be like, here's what happened in these administrations. Here's what happened in this administration. Compare it. Ask the tough questions. That's not happening on social media. Social media is a party, and that's fine. Let it be a party. But I mean, it's its own space. But you have a role to actually influence that space too, and to bring some objective facts to that space, which is, by the way, becoming more and more fact-free, especially with AI, which we won't even get into today. But I'm just saying, that's a whole other conversation. But I'm just saying, like, that's the role that the media has. And if they just pivot back to that, and that interview, which was all about, like, 60% of the questions she asked was about, recycling, Trump said this, what do you say? I mean, this is not the place to say those sorts of questions. You get down to the issues, and they found like one thing about fracking that they could try to pin her down on. It was kind of pathetic. I mean, I really think that the media has a role here, and it needs to reassert what its actual role is, which is, and it can lend to what you're talking about, because we're going to be, I mean, the party on social media is going to run itself out. We all know how that works. I mean, it's going to run out of gas. Okay. Social media is like this. So between now and the election, we need to pivot to substance. We need to pivot to actual, like, looking at their records and what can we actually look that they're going to do. And we do have that opportunity in this debate. I just hope the media doesn't blow it.
Well, when is the debate?
I think is it the 8th? Let me look here.
Yeah, it's coming up next week, within a week.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And I saw or heard something this morning that maybe the Harris campaign is rolling back and they're going to accept open mics.
Well, that's
originally there was a battle of whether the mics should be open or not. But the latest is that the thinking is to leave it open because Trump is saying stuff that harms him during those open mic stages.
September, so it's September 10th. The debate is September 10th. It's on ABC. And the whole thing with the mics, I find to be a bit stupid. I mean, frankly, I don't know if anybody cares about how the viewer feels in this debate. They're all like, how do we make it so that, personally, it was painful for me. I don't know how other people feel, but it was painful for me to watch debates where the mics were not turned off, where those old debates where they're interrupting each other constantly. And like, it was really got more nasty because one wouldn't let
it was
talk. It was mostly him.
Unmoderated, essentially.
Yeah. And I'm like, to keep the mics off. And now the Democrats are coming back and being like, oh, we want to leave the mics on. So he, like, basically gives himself enough rope to hang himself. I'm like, well, what about the person watching who would like to actually understand what's happening and not watch a brawl? Like, I would like to, and I really feel like most people, the voters, would prefer that. I mean, I preferred much more having the mics turned off in the last debate. I mean, the last debate had its own other problems, as we know very well. but that was not one of them. He was
Right.
actually made to shut up. And so I just, yeah, so that's my feeling. Of course, I have an opinion about everything. I'm sorry, William, but but that's my thing about the debate is like, keep the mic, turn him off so we can actually hear what's happening. Because he's going to talk over her. He talked over Hillary. That debate with Hillary where it was like gross to watch. Like I didn't even want to watch it.
Well, that was
Ugh,
kind of scary, actually, as he
totally.
lurked around behind her, uh, and it certainly did it intentionally to intimidate her and to distract her, I'm sure. Um,
It was
but
gross.
that's probably one trick that he can't pull off again.
Oh, I think, anytime we say he can't pull something off, he's got no sense of,
Well, that's true.
anything.
But I think the difference is that Harris, being an ex-prosecutor, could very well turn around and tell him, get, move away and shut up or something.
Well, I think even Hillary has said, and she said, I was so trained to like try to like, because Hillary was always very disciplined, like, and maybe that was part of her downfall. I think everybody knows at this point, if that debate happened today, that she would have, even Hillary would have turned around and said, bug off, get back to your bike. Like, and so but yeah, I think it's gonna be a really interesting debate. I really hope they keep the microphones off, but that's just my humble opinion.
I see.
But I mean, that is a moment to pivot back. That is a moment when hopefully, ABC can like get them on their platform, pin them down, ask about the real key issues people want to talk about. Healthcare. Healthcare is a big issue, and most people are like worried about healthcare. And I think that like, if there's one thing that I would want to give the Biden Harris administration credit for is a lot of the anxiety that people feel now, I feel is about looking to the future anxiety, like climate change, like what is going to happen? Like, the stuff going on with Russia and China and the Middle East, like there's a kind of future anxiety there around things. And it's not, I mean, I do believe that there's still pocketbook issues, especially with inflation and everything. I'm not saying that that's not important, but I think it's married to a kind of like, where are we going? Like, it's scary. It's a little bit scary. And I think that it's important for us as voters to hear what are their plans for these big looming problems, and I think especially younger voters want to hear that. It is about pocketbook issues in the moment, but it's also about, where are we going with these things? And I think the Biden-Harris administration, with their investments they were making and infrastructure and things like this, at least it felt to me like somebody had at least a plan for some of these big looming issues that are just kind of on the other side of the hill.
Right. I think that we both know that there's a difference between the needs of the various cohorts of Republican voters. And much of what was accomplished in the Trump administration benefited the wealthy and did not particularly benefit the ordinary working people. And I think that that's an area that perhaps can be exploited because of minimum wage increases, different things that are taking place that could directly benefit those who've been victimized essentially by bait and switch politics over the years.
Yeah, no, I think that you're right. And I think that it's up to the Harris campaign to exploit those things. And it's also up to the media to, in an objective way, put those things side by side, and ask the tough questions about both administrations. I think there's a lot tougher questions they could be asking of the.
Well, let's play it out to
one.
the end. Let's play it out to election night and look at where we are. And is the Electoral College, going to play a role this time around? What's going to happen? Will one or the other win the majority and lose the electoral college. What's there? That's see, that gets us back to our issues in terms of voting.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
I think that what we're seeing is certainly a massive get off the vote campaign by the Democrats. I would think they want to do
Has
everything
to.
they can. Republicans seem to be sticking to their voter suppression tactics in terms of voter fraud legislation, so forth and so on. Where was it? Yeah, well, certainly with wanting requiring states to have proof of citizenship before allowing voting instead of just swearing under penalty of perjury that they're qualified or that they're
Can
citizens.
I ask a question though that
Sure.
some people would have to that, and I actually do as well? Can I just be honest? Why is that a problem? I mean, you do have to be a citizen to vote. Why don't I have to like actually bring, I mean, okay, not everyone has a passport. Okay, I get that. But why is it such an issue for me to go to the poll and show that I have you know, I have to show my identification to do 100 different things in my daily life. Why don't I have to do that when I go to vote? Which is an important one of the most important civic duties I have.
Well, I don't think it would be a problem if we also had a corollary national identification process like they have in other countries.
Fair enough.
I mean, where
Fair
you have
enough.
national ID card, a national ID card, and every single person carries their ID card to it that establishes who and what they are within the society, even. But we don't have that. We have 50 independent states that
You're
have
right.
50 independent systems, and depending on the state you're in, the requirements could become quite onerous. I
Fair
remember,
enough. So it's an issue of process and practicality.
yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I see. I agree with you. I understand what you're saying. I think that certainly voting should be the benefit of citizenship. I don't.
Absolutely.
I can understand why some municipalities might want to let everyone in the town vote because everybody in the town is affected by whether they shut off Main Street on Friday night for a
Fair or
farmer's
something.
market or a
Yeah,
dance
yeah.
or whatever. I mean, there are things at a local level that would play out like that, but otherwise on the national level, I don't think so.
Yeah, but it's just that, I mean, it's true. I mean, like I have
Well,
a
and also I
passport,
think
but not everyone has a passport. So, a lot of people, a lot of Americans don't have passports. So, I mean, like, what's the thing you show,
well, I
right?
think
And how do
that
you get it?
if there's a corollary to you know if you can follow this, and that is that that where they say that guns don't kill people, people kill people, or whatever.
Yeah,
There is also this concept of voter fraud that is being emphasized to encourage legislation that really suppresses voting. And so if we are to really have universal voting, then we need to make it as easy as possible for people to be registered.
fair enough.
But
Yeah,
so I think that what you want is a system by which registration is effective.
totally.
And at that point, once you are in fact registered, then you have met that criteria. And at that point, you should be able to obtain a ballot by mail if you want to, or there. One state, is it Texas, that you have to be 75 years old and blind and disabled in order to get a mail-in ballot or something? I'm exaggerating this, of course, but there is
Your
that.
home state there, William.
Pardon?
Your home state there.
Yes.
Yeah, well, in terms of just playing this out to, I'm glad I'm glad we're back on the horse, and I'm glad we've got because there's a lot to talk about there. I think that there's a lot to talk about in terms of the voter suppression piece, but then also in terms of AI. and the disinformation piece of things. I did attend like it was a media conference thing, and one of it was a lot of stuff. I attended something about AI and you know, generative AI and the sorts of things that we're looking at this election. And every election cycle now, we're confronting a new, more sophisticated and scarier version of you know, what can be done with technology to misinform and disinform voters. And you know, this year's no exception. And I think that we're lagging in our ability, of course, to deal with these things. And you know, I think one thing that is extremely that I'm trying to, you know, despite all of the, you know, sort of giddiness and everything that's going on with the race at the moment, this is going to be an incredibly close election still. I mean, it's going to be quite close. And, you know, things that are, you know, these marginal things are going to come into play in the swing states. And so how prepared are we to deal with those things? I don't know the answer to that. I'm not on the inside of, you know, what's happening in these states to kind of manage, you know, voter day turnout and everything else. But it does make me concerned. I get concerned about it, and I don't know, and I do think that those things could decide the election. I do.
Well,
Yeah.
I think that, you know, of course, the difference is that you will have a Biden administration in power in Washington instead
Yeah.
of the Trump administration as the results come in. So I think you will be less likely to see that overt attempt to bring in the alternative slates and all, you know, and all of that was arranged directly by Trump supporters. I mean, that was. I don't think we will see that, but I do think that we will see a reaction across the country from the losing side. I mean, and the losing people. That it could be, it could become violent, of course.
Yeah, it could, and it nearly did in 2020. I mean, if you remember, in Arizona, them hanging out in the parking lot with guns, you know, while the vote count was happening, people showed up in the parking lot with guns.
Right.
Not, you know, pretty frightening. So yeah, I am concerned about those things, and I think that there's a lot of layers in this election. You know, there's the issues, there's the policies, there's the media, and then we get to the actual carrying out of the actual electoral process or election process on election day, and then we get to the electoral process after that. And so there's a lot of layers of things going on to keep track of at the same time and think about in terms of how this whole season unfolds for us.
Well, it's going to make for a lot of interesting books coming out of this elelement, I think, because
Yeah, some of them written by you, probably.
not me. I have. Oh, I was going to mention. I actually thought about it when you were talking about AI. You know, my latest book is actually deals with AI,
Oh, cool.
with universal mathematics, and
Oh, yes.
and as a language for AI. But then, as a part of that book, I also dealt with the philosophy of AI. And the problem with AI is that I call it two things. One is mastering AI, and the other is instructing AI. And we have to master AI, or we're never going to be able to ever go anywhere significant in the universe. I mean, it requires that kind of
Computational
tools.
capacity.
We have to
Yeah.
have these intellectual tools that can deal with the mass of information that humans can no longer deal with. But one of the things I thought about as I was working on this is that AI must be instructed according to science, the reality of science, instead of the beliefs of religion and philosophy. You know, because there's where you get into trouble. And in doing so, you also have to look at the society. In other words, who has command authority in that society? Who's commanding that this AI be instructed in this way? And also, what are the mores of that society? What are the standards? What are the values of that society? Now, once we master those things, then AI is our salvation. AI is what will get us off of Earth into the universe. When we look at the flying saucers that come flitting in and out of our atmosphere and the oceans and observing us, those are AI creations. You can't have that level of technology without AI. But we have to master it and we have to properly instruct it. And once
yeah. And again, this will probably be another longer conversation for us, but my concern is we're way behind the 8 ball. We're way late in the instruction piece of things and in the collaboration and coordination, because you've got AI development happening by all kinds of different agencies around the world now, some in competition with each other. And we're not fostering the sort of because you say, a society needs to instruct it according to its mores or whatever. But the thing is, this is a completely global thing now. I mean, we need to be coordinated in how we're instructing AI. And I don't see that level of coordination at all.
No, not at all. And particularly when you look at the fact that we have all of these nuclear tipped ICBMs sitting aimed at each other, and to what extent are they being controlled by AI, or to what extent are we allowing AI to analyze the risk and to make those kinds of decisions? And we're seeing this. We can see the misapplication of AI in Israel's destruction of Gaza, because they're entirely relying on AI and to identify their targets. Those, when they go in and they blow up a house or a medical clinic, they're relying on AI to analyze the intelligence and to put the crosshairs on it and to almost push the trigger. That there's a tremendous amount of that has been taking place in the assault in Gaza.
So is it your thought then that the AI, when it blows up a medical clinic, that is what they intended the AI to do, or that the AI is screwing up?
No, the AI is just analyzing raw intelligence and saying, okay, there's a 20% chance that there is a leader in that location. 20% is enough. Blow it up.
Okay.
Even though there's 80% chance that there's nothing but women and children there. So what you go back to, or what are the philosophies? What is the underlying philosophy that is
in the instruction? Yeah,
that's where you're at, and that's what's dangerous, both on a local application like narrowly there in Gaza, or worldwide, as between our atomic weapons that are aimed at each other.
So these are
But one last quick point, and that is that AI, like these massive weapons that we have, can be used violently and horribly, wrongly. What happens is that our society destroys itself. In other words, it doesn't get anywhere. The only way it's ever going to get anywhere is to overcome what we're talking about.
Right.
I mean, that requires the changes in society that have to take place before we can really ever do anything significant with AI.
And to loop back, those changes need to be driven by visionary leadership.
Yes.
Absolutely, because that's the role of leadership, is to bring about changes in society that actually move us forward and where we can go toward our positive potential, not our negative potential. And leadership, inspired leadership, that's its role. Its role is to be a coordinator and articulate what the true north is, and try to bring people together to they don't have to know everything. You don't have to know everything if you're a leader, but you have to be able to articulate that vision. And that's what we're looking at right now with this presidential campaign, because every term, like I've heard people, and I know that we're probably getting to the end of our talk, but every term that we have now, like some people say, oh, if things go a certain way, it'll just be 4 years, blah, blah, blah. I just did grit and grin and bear it type of thing. But every term that we have now, because of the speed with which change is happening, and it's going to be either positive change or negative change, we don't have time to like have, just be like, oh, it's another term, we'll just live through it type of thing. I feel like every 4 years is becoming more and more sort of definitive for the future, and the decisions being made as we have this sort of accelerated timeline towards some of the scary, I keep going thinking about climate change, they're more and more and more significant every presidential term we have.
Right. It's like hamstringing. I mean, you go through these. What happens within this 4 years really limits the next 4 years as to what you can do because of what has already taken place, and because there is no
your options narrow.
Because you don't have the collaboration. In other words, even though you have a different party in power, they are just simply at opposite ends. They're not cooperating. And cooperation is required for there to be representative government. Otherwise, it's just one form of dictatorship or another. I mean, you can have a dictatorship of a party. I mean, as in China, perhaps.
The Soviets.
or the Soviet Union, of course.
Yeah. Well, this is my last thought, which is just that I think for me, I think voters can fall into my self-interest, my individual thing. How is someone going to help me? Sure, people may vote that way, but I still think that there's more and more emerging a kind of concern about what's over the hill, about the next thing, and that kind of like realization of that and that concern about that might drive people to really want to elect people who can work more collaboratively, because I think there's a recognition that the division is not going to get us anywhere with regard to those issues. So my hope is that voters are starting to pivot a little bit away from just raw self-interest toward who can I put in that chair who's actually going to make headway on that thing over there and who can actually work across the aisle, because there's no other way it's going to happen. And I think that I'm hoping that there's more of that kind of like starts to influence how people think about candidates.
Well, I think that has to do with the feeling responsible for your vote, feeling that your vote is a duty, that as we've talked about before, that our vote is representative of our consent to be governed.
Totally.
And that our consent to be governed is qualified, is
and
conditional,
sacred.
that is conditional on good government. And that our vote is important, that the vote must be valued and not be cast just willy-nilly because you just don't care. And that's the problem with so much of our voting today, particularly for Trump. I think it's just people who just simply no longer care about it, really evaluating the issues to that extent. They're just be voting emotionally. And because it makes them feel good.
And if we as a society were to embrace the kind of recommendations in the voters of having a day off, of making it really kind of like this, almost like this sort of sacred duty,
Exactly.
and imbuing it with that, people would perk up and be like, oh, okay, this is pretty important. I need to do this. I need to I have a day off to do this. There's help with deciphering things, there's help with like all these voter materials. Like instead of just throwing it at them and being like, okay, go do your thing, to make it something that's like really, I'm trying to think of what will be analogous in our current society to what I'm talking about. I'm not sure what, but like the kind of supports in place that make it apparent to the voter that this is an important thing. Because the voter hasn't gotten to, oh, I don't care, they didn't get there on their own. They got there because the society at large treats voting as like kind of an adjunct to everything else you're supposed to do in your life, as opposed to some core, fundamental, super important thing. If the society treated it that way, I think people would take it more seriously.
Like a sacrament.
Well, that's what I was going to say, but I didn't want to make it religious.
Well, but there is something about it. Almost is that if almost as though our democracy, our self-representation, however you want to call it, that concept of self-representation is truly universal. It is a universal requirement. You can't ever really have anything significant without it, because it requires the wisdom of the crowd. It requires us all working together. We have to become bound in a way in our objectives, and that's to a high degree of correlation. I mean, 80%, 90%, 99%. We have to come to agreements as to where we're going. We can't have this, where it's 49 this way and 51 that way. That's nothing. I mean,
I know it doesn't really, there's not really much of a mandate to get out of that, right?
No.
I mean, like it's kind of like this, we're teetering on the edge of like, which way is the wind going to blow? We hope that there's a northeasterly wind today. I mean, like that's kind of where we're at with.
Well,
with
it may
require
horrific catastrophes, both
I'm fearful of that.
both environmentally, as we're seeing, with the hurricane seasons and the intensity of fires and the heat waves and all of this, it's becoming almost undeniable that this is taking place. But also economically, I mean, it could tomorrow. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, it is so incredibly fragile, our international economic system, that and it can be brought down. I mean, it's just like China's buying up gold. Why is gold up? Because China's sucking up gold from all over the world because they have these huge resources. They're not willing to invest those in the United States, buying our bonds, as so much anymore as they're going to buy gold and take their currency to the gold standard.
Which is always, that's the hedge, right? That's the hedge bet against the traditional sort of like currency is gold. That's what you go by when you think there's going to be like, a cataclysmic event.
Because China has in the past, has experienced that kind of inflation. They have experienced their. I mean, I'm talking about 1,000 years ago. I mean, this is nothing new that currency becomes debased, and so that's the kind of thing that's going on in the world today. How are we prepared to deal with that coming out of this election, no matter who's elected? Is our government properly analyzing the world situation in all of these different areas and coming up with policies that work? It's not happening. And that's the problem with the manner in which we formulate policy today. So here we are, folks.
Well, I have to say, I love that conversation, William. That was great.
Yep, the voters'
Bill of Rights, folks, the voters. It's a path out of this. Read the voters. It's just, we got to start somewhere,
We're not selling books.
We're not.
You can get the book if you want it, if you like a book like this, but they're all for free on williamjohncox.com. You can have any of my books that you would like. All I want to do is to give them away and to have them read. For those who are interested in the mindful aspects of all of this, go to themind.info, and there you will find the Gift of Mind series of books. And finally, if you'd like to know more about the Voters' Bill of Rights, go to thevote.io. And there you can download the information about the Voters' Bill of Rights and also cast a vote one way or the other if you'd like. And finally, what should everybody in this country do that has the power to do if they want to make a change in our elections? Ask every candidate, every elected office, do you support our Voters' Bill of Rights? Yes. That's the question.
Ask them that question. Do you support our Voters' Bill of Rights? And if they say, what's that? Then you provide it to them and say, I'll be back in 5 days.
Exactly.
With this answer, I'd like to know your answer.
Right. Study the issues and come back with an answer. So.
Well, we're back in it. We're back in it, William.
Yes.
It's from now, we're from now to the end.
So we're going to stick it out?
We're going to stick it out. We got to stick it out.
Well, folks, those of you who have hung with us, we appreciate it. If not, we sure have a good time.
Yeah, exactly. So this is what it's like when I'm caffeinated in the morning, but but the issues mostly propel me. That's kind of
Well, here's to the American people, or to the people, not the
the
American people, but to the people.
the
And
people.
the people. And may your
Consent to be governed never be taken for granted.
Which, by the way, was the dedication of this book. Okay, folks, thanks for joining us. Next week.
Till next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.